So if someone asked you, does the flavor of food affect student satisfaction at the dining hall? You would say, excuse me, yes, the better the flavor, the better the satisfaction. And there's no it depends here, because it doesn't depend on anything. Alternatively, does the serving size affect student satisfaction with the dining hall? You'd say yes, the more food, the more satisfaction. Again, no, it depends. So the remainder of this assignment will need to be completed as homework that's due for next week's lab. Again, it's April 1st. Follow the steps we just did and you should be fine. I do want to alert you to number 6. Number 6 lists an ANOVA table and if the main effects and interactions are significant. Again, if P is less than 0.05, the effect is significant. For all of the other ones, let's see. All the other ones, you can assume that if the marginal means are different, meaning not the same, that it's significant. Example 6 is just showing you if these main effects are significant. And if it's less than 0.05, then it is, which means the effect is there. All right, moving on. Take a drink real quick. All right. Finally, we're going to finish the lab up with proposal paper assignment information. So your study must have 3 variables. That's for everyone's study. If you have an experiment, you should have 2 independent variables and 1 dependent variable. An example experiment would be, does the effect of gender on job interviewer ratings depend on age? So gender and age are your IVs, and ratings is your DV. If you have a correlational study, you need a predictor, a moderator, and an outcome. So for example, does the effect of IQ, which is a predictor, on grades, which is an outcome, depend on parental support, which is a predictor and also a moderator? So the difference between these 2 designs, experiment and correlation, is that experiments can randomly assign variables. Correlational studies cannot. So let me get my laser pointer back out. So fancy. IQ cannot be randomly assigned. I cannot split a room in 2 and say, okay, you guys are going to have an IQ of this and you guys are going to have an IQ of this. And parental support cannot be randomly assigned because that's not ethical. You can't make parents be mean to their kids. Gender cannot be randomly assigned. Oh, this is a bad example. I'm so sorry. Age can't be either. Let me see. Which one can be randomly assigned? The effect of, let's say, test, because a test can be randomly assigned, on job interview ratings depend on age. Sorry for that bad example, everyone. All right, moving on. So, experimental design. It uses independent variables and dependent variables. At least one of your independent variables has to be manipulated. So you can assign them to one condition or the other, where the experimenter has control over who is in what condition, usually random assignment. So at least one of your variables has to be that. You cannot randomly assign people to some conditions. Like, you can't assign people to have traumatic injuries, to have a disorder, to have a naturally occurring or pre-existing construct that you measure. So you can't randomly assign people to have, like, I don't know, high blood pressure, for example. And your final paper will have 2 IVs and 1 DV. Only one of them has to be manipulated. So you could have like gender and drug type given, for example, a placebo and a actual drug, because the drug type can be manipulated, but gender can't be. But only one of them has to be manipulated. For a correlation, you have a predictor, moderator, and outcome. So not independent variable, dependent variable. So, when the experimenter does not manipulate or assign people to categories, you need to use correlation terms, even if the article author doesn't, which will make your paper introduction more cohesive. So this is more for your, when you're writing about the studies you reviewed. If the study did not manipulate the variables or assign people to them, you have to say correlational terms. So you can't say caused an effect, for example. This measures naturally occurring variables in groups of people. So if you're studying something that you're interested in proposing something that you cannot randomly assign, you have to do a correlational design. So for example, you cannot randomly assign people to have married parents. So that would have to be a correlational design. And you can't infer causation. So relates to instead of effects or causes, for example. So some variables. If you are stuck on trying to think of a paper proposal, let's think about some outcomes. So what outcome are you interested in measuring? Maybe you are interested in measuring improvement for a disorder, so how much better someone gets in ADHD, for example, or achievement, maybe grades, or satisfaction, or happiness, or outcomes, or maybe negative impacts, so the effects of racism, for example. This is your outcome variable, or your dependent variable. The next thing you should think about when brainstorming is what might impact this outcome. So what might impact this? Maybe types of treatment or personal behaviors, interactions with others, life circumstances. So for example, what kind of parents you have, your income, your culture, social influence, cognitive processes, so many things. But this would be your independent variable or your predictor variable. And third, you need to think about what else could alter the outcome. Personality, social support, influence, circumstances. This is your second independent variable or your moderator variable. So you need 2 independent variables or predictor variables and 1 outcome or dependent variable. So for a correlational study, your predictor and outcome variables have to be continuous. I'll say that again. For a correlational study, your predictor and outcome variables have to be continuous. So if you're measuring drinking, for example, it can't be, do they drink? Yes or no? Because that's discrete. It has to be continuous. How much do they drink? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, for example. You don't have to change your topic if you had a discrete variable. You just need to think about the ways to measure it in a continuous way. So, did they improve? Yes or no? Then you could change to how much did they improve? A little or a lot. And then your moderator should be discrete, only 2 levels, which means like the yes or no. So your moderator in a correlational study can be discrete. So for example, if you want to do a correlational study of how much someone drinks per week, how that affects their happiness, but if that depends on if they are rich or poor, you would have how much they drink on a 1 to 6 scale, happiness on a 1 to 6 scale, for example, and then maybe if they're rich, or their income level would be discrete, so rich or poor. For an experimental study, your IVs need to be discrete and your DV has to be continuous. So your IV, this is an example study. Let's say priming with the speed of words, so fast versus slow. IV2 is the time between priming and letting them leave, so 10 seconds versus 5 minutes. Dependent variable, which would go in these squares here, is the speed at which they walk. So you see how both of these independent variables are discrete. It's not measured on a 1 to 5 scale, for example. It's just fast or slow, 10 versus 5. So you can choose any 3 variables that are of interest of you and that make sense together. That second one is important. So, for example, if you propose to me your predictor variable is parenting style, your outcome is teenage drinking, and your moderator is number of pets in the house. So you'd be hypothesizing that the effect of parenting style on teen drinking depends on how many pets you have in your house. You'd have to really convince me why that makes sense, because logically that does not make sense. So try to choose things that make sense. So that's the end of the lab. Thank you so much. That was a lot. In-lab factorial designs assignment is due at the beginning of lab next week. Like I said, that's April. There'll be a spot for that. I'm still holding office hours. They're usually on Tuesdays from 11 to 12 via Zoom. Email me if you want to Zoom meet with me. If that time doesn't work for you, I'm obviously working from home just like everyone else is, so I'm available. Not all the time, but I have some times during the week I can. If you're confused on any of this, if you need extra help, I'm here. So just feel free to reach out. And that is everything. Thank you all.